Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the EI Interconnect podcast, where we sit down with the people here reimagining the way we build, automate, and scale the future. I'm your host, Lauren, and today we are going deep into the intersection of cities, infrastructure, and immersive technology with someone who is not just watching the shift, but shipping it. I'm joined by Jack Ellis and managing partner at Smart City Labs, a company that's redefining what public spaces can be uh, through intelligence infrastructure, data layers, and immersive civic engagement. Jack, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, and thank you for that nice introduction. Appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. This is great. Let's let's start with your personal story. Before Smart City Labs, what were the major influences or experiences that led you to this point?
So my background is real estate, and by real estate I mean shopping centers, shopping malls, hotels, multifamily communities, mixed-use projects, urban districts, and came through academics in terms of urban planning and public policy. So I've always been interested in cities and how they grow and how we can make them better. My real estate career was really about creating large-scale urban developments. And about 20 years ago, actually a little bit longer than that now, I was involved in a project in Times Square that was really my first exposure to how technology can help activate a space. Happened to be a project in Times Square in New York City, so it was very media based. So everything we're doing today is sort of an evolution from that starting point.
Okay, fantastic. I like this. Good introduction. What was the moment where you realized that city could or should work differently?
Well, I was a geek from the beginning, so I guess when I was a little kid, I made my dad take me to the opening of a hotel in Century City, which was a groundbreaking development in Los Angeles for its time. And that was my second grade show and tell. I think they were a little confused by what I was getting at. But so I've always been interested in cities. That's why I went to studied urban planning in school. And when I got out, I realized that I really wasn't interested in just being somebody that wrote plans. I wanted to be involved in actually making things happen. And that's why I took the first opportunity I could to jump into the actual development of projects. Um, and today I see technology as being an important tool in urban development, much in the same way that community redevelopment agencies and public policy are and have been in the past.
Okay. Uh, ah, your father. This is great. I like this.
He was a patient
Yeah.
man.
Of course, it's beautiful. And okay, then, was there a turning point or insight that really planted the seed for Smart City Labs?
Yeah, so the experience in Times Square was interesting because I realized rather quickly that aside from the fact that at the time I was working for a California-based shopping mall company and we were building an urban vertical retail project in the heart of Times Square, which was pre-Disney, so it was quite pioneering just conceptually. And the sort of the centerpiece of the project was a 360 monitor video wall. Um, very sort of exciting concept to propose that our architect came up with. The reality was at that time there was no such technology to support that. And so very quickly we had to backfill some important roles, technology, ad sales, all sorts of things that are not really part of the program typically in a shopping mall company. So about 20 years ago, I had an opportunity to sort of revisit that issue. We had the opportunity to do a project in Hollywood on Hollywood Boulevard in the Walk of Fame, and we were able to bring the Academy Awards back to Hollywood. And as a part of that project, I came up with what today would be described as a smart building, basically wiring all the public spaces and event venues together. And then we were going to integrate that into a large scale digital media platform that people could interact with. So you walk in this giant courtyard and be surrounded by the story of Hollywood. This time around, I had a electrical engineer, a content strategy, a media partner, and so we had the right team. But what the challenge was at that time was it was well ahead of its time in terms of the real estate industry. So here we are 20 years later, we're still having some of the same conversations, but I'm happy to say that a lot more of the built world, meaning real estate owners in the public sector, understand that technology offers a lot of promise for connecting communities, but they're just beginning to understand the importance of things like infrastructure. That means basic connectivity, compute power, not to mention the engagement with the public side. So all of those sort of learnings have led us to where we are today. But Smart City Lab specifically was formed out of something called the I3 Consortium, which was a group founded at USC by the Schools of Business and Engineering. And the idea there was to discuss the possibilities for an open data marketplace, sort of the anti-Google, if you will. So instead of data going off to these big tech companies, the people that created the data, that provided the data essentially, would have a stake in the disposition and monetization of that data. In those conversations, I realized that a lot of the technology partners that were in the room in those conversations were talking well over the heads of people like me in the real estate world, and there needed to be a translation. And so Smart City Labs was really born with that idea in mind as a sort of in between the tech world and the real estate world, so that we could actually integrate technology into useful applications into real life real estate assets. And the way we do that is by creating understandable use cases across the real estate spectrum. So hospitality, multifamily, mixed use, retail. And so we have quite a handful, I should say, of really interesting use cases that are now underway that demonstrate what we're talking about. I will say that the key to the whole platform is something that we call a cognitive digital twin. That's essentially a 3D visualization of the physical asset, meaning the mixed use complex or the building. And we then plug in building systems, proprietary sensor network, and we allow it creates an easy to understand visualization of the asset. So basically anybody can play. So a building manager can show up to work in the morning and see exactly what's going on in his building. But that same asset, the cognitive twin, can also serve as a guest engagement tool. So I could go on, but I'll leave it there for a second.
I really love it. This is great. Okay, then I mean, maybe I'm gonna repeat yourself. Then let's get into Smart City Lab itself. What's the core mission? I mean, connect everything, but what makes your approach also different from traditional urban planning or civic tech firms?
So let me divide that into two things. The core mission is to add value. And I mean that in both financial and human terms. And so that means benefiting all stakeholders in a community, from little kids on their way to school to the people that own the assets. So that's adding value. But the mission really is for people to understand exactly how technology can help. And that's where the cognitive twin comes in. And our key sort of value proposition is that we have partnered for R&D with the Qualcomm Institute, which is a multidisciplinary innovation lab based at UC San Diego. My partner there is Neil Smith, who heads up the Immersive Visualization Center. And they're really the drivers behind the cognitive twin, which is built on the Unreal Engine platform. That's an important thing to note, because what that means is it creates a both interactive and immersive platform, but also opens the door to the gamification. So things like, if you think about Hollywood Boulevard, one of our use cases that we're looking at, there's all sorts of live entertainment venues. Integrating the game engine with the live performance is a very compelling future platform. You've had as many as 20 million people show up for live events within the game platforms. So that's an exciting sort of growth vehicle. But it all starts with the Qualcomm Institute Cognitive Twin, which is really an exciting tool, because on a basic level, a property owner or a community member can see in rather compelling 3D way a building and can imagine what it could be like if it was modified in some way, enhanced in some way. So you can help people sort of visualize the future in a way that's difficult for some people.
Awesome. You also talk about digital innovation districts. Can you unpack what that looked like in the real world?
Yeah, so in real estate, there is a sort of a principle of scale. In other words, it's just as easy to do a $50 million project it is to do a $5 million project. So the idea is when you start thinking about things like connectivity, which is essentially fiber and wireless networks, it really makes sense to think about those kinds of things on a community level scale. And one of the things that I came across early on was the research that had been done by the Brookings Institute on the idea of innovation district and what it takes to make a successful innovation district. So being anchored by a major industry, as Hollywood obviously is by media, universities like UCSD, our partner in San Diego, they can also be an anchor. And so really thinking about these things in larger scale ecosystems is important. And I would say that as a business, Smart City Labs is really uniquely positioned because unlike technology companies, unlike real estate companies, we take a holistic view at a community. And that comes from a background of having planned, built, leased, marketed, operated all sorts of property assets. So we have the perspective of an owner, but also as a member of the community, and coming from a background from public policy, understanding the greater public good is an important part of it. And that sometimes is missing from the conversation on both the real estate and the technology side. So we think it's an important piece of the discussion.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, I'm just curious, what does a day in the life of a Smart City Lab actually looks like, and from network infrastructure to immersive media to edge data?
So it involves a lot of conversations with potential technology partners. So it's not like you call up Honeywell and say, I want to be a smart city. You can do that, but those results probably are not going to be as, let's say, curated to your experience, to your needs, as they might be. So what we've done is create what in the design world they call a kit of parts. And so we have a amazing data storage and compute partner that has a proprietary technology that is really going to change the game. That's at the core of it. I've talked about the cognitive twin. This is a proprietary platform. We have formed a entity as a spinoff from UCSD from the Qualcomm Institute through their Office of Commercialization to handle that IP. So to answer your question, it's a little bit about the technology in those conversations. It's a little bit about the projects, because one thing that's true is you can't sit around and wait for people to say, hey, I want a smart city. You need to be able to say, okay, hotel owner, okay, shopping center owner, here's how we can benefit your property. Here's how we can add value to your asset. Here's how we can drive traffic and therefore revenues. So at the end of the day, the real estate owner has a very simple equation. They want to know what's happening in the lower right-hand corner of a spreadsheet. Technology company is looking for use cases. They're looking to sell their product. So we sit at the nexus of that saying, all right, great. To satisfy the objectives of the property owner, and that means, partly answer your question, part of the day has to be spent understanding current conditions. So in addition to everything that's going on in the world, the real estate market is also changing in a very dramatic way as we speak. We're in the middle of a very significant change in the cycle. Understanding how long those cycles last, what that means. So specifically, everybody knows what's going on in the office world. There's a migration to Class A assets, meaning if I'm going to get you to come back to the office, it better be compelling. So either that's going to be in a really cool space in a converted industrial building, or it's going to be in a new tower, things like Hudson Yards, One Grand Central, things like that. Those are the trophy assets, as they're called. There's a whole bunch of real estate that doesn't qualify under either one of those categories. So the owners of those properties need to decide, all right, should I spend a lot of money and convert that into a different property type? Or do I spend a little less money and bring that up to speed and add the kind of infrastructure that's going to be table stakes, meaning fiber connectivity, 5-bar cell service wherever you are in the building, compute storage on premise, amenities for the users of the space. All of those things are part of what we offer because our background involves looking at physical assets and coming up with enhancement strategies. Technology is just the latest tool in that toolkit.
Okay, like it even more. You are right at the frontier of multiple intersecting trends. AI, obviously, 5G, XR, sustainability, civic innovation. What are you seeing that others are not talking about or not enough?
Well, that's a lot of things that you mentioned. And one reality, and one of the reasons that the cognitive twin is so important is it's very easy to lose people in these technology conversations. And most people don't want to admit they don't know what you're talking about. And generally speaking, in the real estate world, people are sort of my vintage. If they're running an asset there and they know something about technology, but probably not a ton. And so when you start talking, you need to make sure that you stay on a very narrow path so that you're actually connecting, because otherwise it gets really technical. You lose them, they get frustrated, and you're not really making the conversation tends not to be as productive as it needs to be. So there's an important part of it is communicating the point effectively. The other point to make is that there's a value to this, and it's pretty simple. When you think about it, in the world today, if you do not have digital access in your home to be able to do your homework, your opportunity for success in life is limited. That's the digital divide. And if we do nothing by the end of the day, it'll be to do something to address that. That sounds like a pretty simple thing to address, but you would be surprised. And let me just give you a quick example. So fiber connectivity is the sort of the key to the future, okay? And it's the key to solving the digital divide. I think you would be shocked if you could see a fiber map of your city, because it's an expression of what happens when nobody's sort of doing a master plan. And so in the city of LA, certain buildings are connected, certain buildings are not at all. And things like in the city of LA, the LA Unified School District was all connected by the Department of Water and Power back in the day. They connected the high schools and the junior high schools. What they did not connect is the elementary schools. Where does digital literacy begin? Elementary schools. So there's these giant holes in our technology infrastructure that need to be addressed. So there's got to be a political understanding of the needs for this. The problem is most cities are in some sort of a fiscal situation that precludes the ability to look at large-scale infrastructure improvements. So part of the conversation and part of the day is spent on the important issue of capital and understanding how these things get funded. So we've got we're in conversations with partners that can fund infrastructure on a district-wide level. That's in exchange for a signature by a city or a hospital or a school or something like that. But we're also looking at the next level, which is providing infrastructure to private property assets with the right kind of institutional ownership, so it's secure. So we go in, we put in the infrastructure. It comes down to one throat to choke, one back to pat, as they say, so they know exactly who to call. Making it simple, we say, all right, tell us what your problems are. We'll come up with the solutions. We'll explain those solutions. We'll show you how it's all working in this dashboard called the 3D digital twin, the cognitive twin. So you'll be able to monitor everything that's going on. But we pay for it. We're responsible for it. And you write us a check every month based on your usage. So that's another model. So capitalization of these things is important because there's a significant investment. And obviously optimizing that investment, doing it as cost efficiently as possible. The great news is that technology is allowing that to happen in ways, things like you can put a lot of connectivity in a street light, in the light itself. So I can change out the street lights on a street and have connectivity by the afternoon. So it's thinking about ways that there can be cost-effective solutions to the specific problem, because it's definitely not one size fits all. Long answer to your short question, but it's a lot of talking, as you might imagine, but it's a lot of different conversations because you're thinking about the entire ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, the only way this is going to really occur is if you make it easy and sort of modular in the sense of, all right, we'll source the solution, we'll run the solution, we'll identify the capitalization strategy, and we'll be there for you when there's a problem.
No, that's right. I mean, there is a lot of people involved. Everybody's involved, basically, in this technology adaptation and I mean, the cost also is an issue, and any patterns in how cities or property developers are engaging this transformation or resisting the transformation, one or the other.
Well, it's a little of both. I think on an individual level, guys my age tend to be frightened of it. I've encountered open hostility. I've also a great quote, and I won't attribute it, but I was pitching it to somebody who was involved in a very important member of a local community, and I lay out the whole program, and his comment to me, he goes, "Well, Jack, I have to find people that understand what you're talking about, and then I have to find people that care." And I will say that there is a lack of leadership on this front. And I think that partly is attributable, and I'm going to lay it at the feet of first the technology companies, because the technology companies have to be good corporate citizens as well. One of the things that's true in Los Angeles right now is that a lot of the big local companies, the local banks, the local enterprises that grew up here, they've moved on to other cities, they've relocated, whatever. So you don't have the level of local corporate leadership that used to be the case, that you would stand up and really captain these sort of civic enterprises. So I think there's a role to play by the technology companies, but I also think that real estate developers who are responsible for delivering the built world have to take ownership of this as well. And the good news is, inevitably, the younger generation that grew up playing games and is part of that digital world, they understand the importance of this in a way that some of the older folks don't. So it's inevitable. The question is when. And so, of course, we're trying to drive change as quickly as possible by showing what is possible in these sort of high-profile use cases. We have a project on the campus of UC San Diego, starting at in Atkinson Hall, which is the headquarters of the engineering school and Qualcomm Institute. We're working on a pilot on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood to sort of counterpoint the project that we did at Hollywood and Highland and the Dolby Theater. We're working with a number of hotels to show how it works in hospitality, working with an international retailer to show how it works in that context. So the idea is to show sort of a range of use cases that people can say, okay, they did it. Let me understand that because it's clearly the future. Back in the retail days when I was building shopping malls, there was a concept called the bell cow. And the bell cow is the cow that gets all the other cows to follow. So when you have a brand new shopping center, you got to find your first couple tenants. That's the bell cow. So once you do that, everybody else follows. Same story. The idea here is to create bell cow projects that people understand, and then really creates interest in doing additional projects.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But developers, they, whatever the project, they never want to spend more than the strict minimum. And obviously wiring everything, censoring everything in the building, and putting all this together increase the cost extremely. Then I guess could be a hurdle.
And that's why I use the term added value. That's a term with some major import in the real estate world. And at the end of the day, I would say the vast majority of the real estate business is people looking at buildings strictly as assets, items in a spreadsheet. I have never looked at things that way, as you can imagine from my background, as an urban planner and thinking about public policy and also being a design geek. I care greatly about all of these details, but you need to be mindful that what you're doing isn't at the end of the day going to add value, whether that be financial or human or both, ideally. And so if you're going to get the attention of the real estate developer, you clearly have to look at it as a value add strategy. So my next meeting today is to talk to the general manager of a property. He understands the opportunities we're talking about on a asset level. The challenge in this conversation is that the asset managers, the number crunchers, didn't learn about what we're talking about in school, so it does not compute. So it's a matter of, all right, so what's the strategy? So that's a big part of the conversation is, all right, strategically, how do we navigate this opportunity? Because the technology doesn't sell itself. Technology is not the problem. We have the technology that we need. The problem is people, is helping people understand what the technology can do, why it's not a threat, it's a benefit, and how it adds value. And so the easiest way to show how it adds value is to demonstrate that in a spreadsheet with real revenues. So that's really the focus, is generating use cases that people can look at and go, okay, I got that. Let's do that here. And that way we can then say, and then you say, okay, let's scale it. So we're looking at things that are easy to scale. So hospitality properties, obviously, when you think about a cognitive twin, it's got an important role in a hotel, to use hospitality terms, in the back of the house, meaning operating the facility better, but also in the front of the house, meaning providing a better guest experience. So being able to articulate both of those things and demonstrate why the investment makes money is really the key. And so if we have to underwrite the situation ourselves initially to prove that it makes money, well, we'll make the money in that case, right? We'll do a rev share with the property owner, but at the end of the day, inevitably, it'll be a little bit more where the property developer goes, okay, this makes sense. Let's talk about this. But literally, I was walking through a brand new real estate asset about a year ago, luxury condominium project, right here on a great address. And I look at the wall and I'm like, it had a phone jack. And I'm like, what's that? And he goes, that's our technology. And I'm like, how does a luxury buyer put up with that? Meaning it's a phone jack, not a USB port, not another technology you'd expect. And so I quizzed him about it. He's like, oh gosh, I'm so tired of talking to tech bros. I try to have as little technology as possible. All I'll put in a building is smart locks. Okay, well, the dinosaurs that walk the earth are no longer around. So people like that are going to find they're very quickly going to have to meet the market. People's expectations is 5 bars everywhere. Nobody really understands what it takes to get that. They just know that when there's a spinning wheel on their phone, they're frustrated. So you need to be able to deliver awesome connectivity. And we have the ability to do that. One interesting thing I discovered is there's actually 2 digital divides in California. There is a high-speed network called CENIC, C-E-N-I-C, that connects all the institutions of higher learning and schools and things like that. Depending on where you are in that network, your network speed can be 400 times faster than the typical resident. You're like, okay, yeah, that example. When you see that happen in front of you, like, when can I get this? So we're all sort of suffering from this sort of subpar service because we don't know any better. And so when you actually see world-class connectivity, it's going to make a huge difference. Think about what that means in terms of productivity. How much time did we burn trying to connect this morning? How much time do you spend trying to load a page? Add all that up over the course of the day, cumulatively, that's a lot of lost productivity. So there's value right there in just bringing the infrastructure up to speed. So I think the infrastructure piece is fundamental. It's just a matter of figuring out the capitalization strategy and getting the political powers that be to understand the importance of it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it was coming. My question was every ball project heat resistance, and your work involved a ton of stakeholders, basically the city, property owners, tech partners, civic organization. What have been some of the biggest challenges you faced? And obviously, there's probably all of the above, but technically, operationally, And you just mentioned politically as well, and I'm sure, or
I don't want
missing
to
something.
I don't want to single out politicians, although at this very moment it's rather easy to do that, I'll
Yeah,
say. Um, but I think it's a bigger problem than that, and it's the same problem I think the real estate development community has, but technology as well. There's a lack of understanding of what's possible and the basic food groups involved. So uh, politicians have a certain set of priorities. Technology companies have another set of priorities. Real estate companies have a different set. They speak different languages. They value money differently. Their timetables are different. So understanding how those things intersect. A real estate developer, if I own an office building, I'm not thinking about the budget of that building, meaning I'm not buying a major capital item, except once a year when I look at the budget. And then I budget for that capital item. It's all a very long-term thing. So when somebody sits in my office and tries to sell me a piece of equipment, it's probably a waste of everybody's time because first of all, I may or may not be the decision maker. And secondly, it's not like there's some bag of cash sitting in the back room ready to buy cool new stuff. You really need to think about how these things can be financed. In terms of a political situation, it's like, what's the gain to me, right? Politicians trying to get reelected, they're worried about their little corner of the world. And that corner of the world may or may not be part of the innovation district that you're proposing. It may not be. So all of these things require a lot of sort of background research to understand the context because a lot of people operate without sort of complete awareness of the situation. And that's where I think the cognitive twin is really important because it serves as a central point of truth. It is literally visualization of real life data. And so everybody can then operate off the same set of plans. So when you think about the digital twin as a planning tool, I come into your neighbor and said, all right, I want to tear down that single family home and build a 5-story apartment building. Your immediate reaction is going to be, oh no, people don't like change. If I can show you what that looks like, at least you'll have an understanding what that means. But then if I can say, all right, and by the way, this is what the impact is going to be on your property values. Because now I brought new, fresh inventory into your neighborhood. There is going to be an uplift in your community. Here's why, based on comparables. So it's a fact-based approach. So it takes some of the emotion out of it. I've spent a fair amount of time in front of rooms of angry people trying to get projects approved. And the reality is, a typical project has a budget for 3 to 5 renderings. So you're trying to convince people of the merits of a plan based on very limited information visually. Most people can't read blueprints. But imagine if I could walk you through a potential project in a 3-dimensional manner so you can actually walk inside the building, see it from any angle, turn it upside down. Everybody has a shared perspective. What's the result of that? The architect has to work harder to consider all the impacts. The neighbor gets to understand what that means to them and how it can help them and modify the project as necessary. I mean, think about it. Typically, it's like, oh, I don't like tall buildings. Take 5 floors off. What exactly was the impact of that? Potentially, it made the building shorter and squattier. What does that mean? It means less open space, less public space at the bottom of the building. So looking at these impacts in a digital tool format really helps people understand what's possible. And the end result is you get a better city out of it, better community.
I agree 100%. Everybody should be agreeing on this.
Well, you have to show them, this is a fairly new application for digital twins. Digital twins are very common, building airplanes, factory production. I mean, think about it. I'm trying to teach you how to fix a jet engine. Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could walk you inside that jet engine so you could see it on a large scale, right? The only way to really do that is digitally. Using it as a planning tool for community development, that's fairly new. And where it gets really powerful is we have a project we're working on in San Diego with UCSD. They sponsored the Blue Line, which is a light rail system that runs from the campus all the way to the Mexican border. 32 stops, 26 miles. All the stations are in neighborhoods that, and they're basically parking lots, the back of a self-storage facility, body shops. There's sort of disused properties, not high density. So this can be a tool to show people what high density housing would look like in their community and show them what that will mean in terms of housing in San Diego in general. San Diego has the highest housing prices in the country. There's a reason for that because there's a little inventory. by adding significant inventory in these places where it's logical, where you're not throwing more cars on the highway, where all you need to do is go downstairs and take the train to work to your employment center. There's a logic to it when you look at it in a big picture way, and I can show you what the impacts on your neighborhood are. Otherwise, it's like, I don't like change. I don't understand change. I don't understand what's being proposed. I don't trust developers inherently. They're sitting right next to the politicians. I don't trust them either. How on earth do you think you're going to get anything approved in that context? So to me, the central point of truth element of it is a key part of the value of the cognitive twin. The other thing I should mention is that the cognitive twin goes by another name because remember, we're building it on a game platform. That cognitive twin can very easily be turned into a game. So what that means is I can incentivize you to explore the neighborhood. That's a way of incentivizing people to visit a variety of businesses. We can also apply that when it's time to think about things that are cultural. So think about a complex of museums like the Smithsonian in DC, Balboa Park in San Diego, any number of examples where you can actually get people to go explore something. So there's that threshold of issue of getting somebody in the door. You know, how hard is it to drag somebody into an opera house if they've never been exposed to opera, right? If I could get you in there, very easy, low stakes, I don't need to dress you up, I don't need to drag you downtown or whatever it is, and I can expose you to something wonderful, I might peel off a couple of future opera lovers, right? Same thing with art museums, you know, you name it, but these kinds of sort of new experiences, the threshold is getting people literally over the threshold. This is a way of doing that in an incentivized way. That's sort of the sexy fun part of it. So we think of the twins as a full life cycle asset, meaning you can use it for planning, design, operations, and then engagement with the user. So it's a very valuable tool, and I think it's going to be ubiquitous before too long.
I love it. Give me access. I play with it. No problem.
We'll invite you.
And what still keep you up at night when you think about scaling your vision?
Well, fortunately, I'm a pretty sound sleeper because all of these details are enough to keep you up at night. What gets me excited about getting out of bed in the morning is making progress on this front. And we are very close to launching a chunk of Hollywood called the Vinyl District. I've been involved in it. I was involved in it initially because I was asked, some property owners in the area said, hey, Jack, we want to create the next meatpacking district. And so I'm like, well, that's a real place in New York City. What are you talking about? I said, well, I think there's something here. So I went off and did some research and found out that there's a section of Hollywood. And look, my grandfather had a grocery store in Hollywood 100 years ago. So I've heard about Hollywood my entire life. And obviously bringing the Academy Awards back. So I am deeply embedded in this and think I'm something of a subject matter expert on this topic. Well, I found out there's this whole history that I didn't know anything about, and nobody did. And it's never been written about, no books, nothing. So the idea is there's this whole history that's lying there in plain sight. So there's a punchline in the story. So I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But if you think about it, it's music. So to tell this history of a musical place, you want to be able to have an audio component, right? So meaning an article is not going to do the trick. So I go back to the people that said, Jack, go do this. And I sit down and go, so the only way we're going to be able to tell this story is through technology. And they go, okay, what do you mean? So, and I can't believe that this was my first card that I put down, but I said, well, you know what an IoT network is, right? And I'm like, what? In thinking back, it's like, really, that's what you said? But here we are 5 years later. Still true that technology has to be a piece of it, but now we understand the technology that will enable that. And so when we think about the digital twin, that's going to open the door to live performance. But what really gets interesting is creating tours through Hollywood that are virtual. So the people that are coming to Hollywood, thinking about Hollywood, interested in Hollywood, they can have a real experience and see a live performance. But we can also bring back historic destinations that no longer exist as a way to tell the story. Things like the Brown Derby, things like nightclubs that were around in the 60s when there was a big music scene in Hollywood that's now lost. So creating places where history actually happened, that you can actually visit in real time, experience, and therefore buy the song, buy the merchandise. So the talent involved can monetize it, the rights holders can monetize it, and the people that want to experience Hollywood in a meaningful way, they have the experience they came to look for. Because if you think about it, the Walk of Fame is its big tourist attraction. It's also voted the most disappointing tourist attraction in the world. Why is that? Because you show up and you came to Hollywood with some digital experience, either streaming, in a movie theater, whatever. Then you come to Hollywood, you see these stars on the sidewalk, they're completely analog. What's the logical next step? Digital storytelling. Well, okay, to unlock the value of that, there's another dimension, everything I've said already, which is the intellectual property. So if Laurent's got a star on the Walk of Fame, he probably doesn't own the content that he was in, but the people that own that content are highly likely to be interested in monetizing it. So creating a data ontology that says, okay, I want to know the story of Laurent. I'm standing on it. Great. So that means I need to go to this archive to get the content he's interested in. I need to sign off the rights on that, and I need to monetize that, meaning pay for those rights. All in an instant with no latency, because Laurent, the person who's interested in Laurent's story has a 3-second attention span, right? So you need to be able, so there's a technology issue, there's an IP story, right? All of these things need to be factored into delivering the experience we're talking about.
Love it.
That doesn't keep me up at night necessarily, but it takes a while to piece all that together.
But it makes you wake up easy. Wonderful. And this experience of visiting the past and going into the future, it's a 3D model, or it's a Google model. It's how do you visualize it through the digital twin?
So at the end of the day, I'm all about the physical world. So to me, everything we're talking about is a tool to enhance the actual world that we all live in, because at the end of the day, that's where people actually live. And
Excellent.
so a key piece of that is I don't want people walking around town with giant headsets.
No.
Now, of course, I'm not the decision maker, but the market has spoken. First of all, 50% of the population doesn't want to walk around with a headset on because it makes them feel vulnerable. Guys somehow miss that fact. But people also don't want to, people don't want to be disengaged from the real world. So the idea is Google Glasses. I don't know if you've been in any of the Meta pop-up stores. They actually did a pretty credible job at the one here in LA. I went to a meeting a couple weeks ago, and the guy that was bankrolling the whole project, he had them on. I wasn't sure if it was. And then the next meeting, all of his guys had them on, and he had given them. So it's like, and I thought that was an interesting way of really driving change and signifying that you're interested in looking at the future. It's like, everybody, this is what we're doing. So, but to answer your question, it's a 3-dimensional model. It's built in the Unreal Engine. It's a visualization that looks like the real thing. It's like a Hallmark version. The reality is, though, it also is a virtual filing cabinet. So when you're looking at the visualization, it's also backed up by every bit of data about that place, that asset, all that. And that's where the data storage comes in to be able to do that. You know, there's limits to capacity. So it's like, how do you actually deliver on that? That's a technology question that took a little while to sort out. But data storage technology is improving, connectivity technology is improving. So all those things are possible in a way that weren't before. Because at the end of the day, if you stand on, let's say, whether it's on the UCSD campus or on Hollywood Boulevard, the connectivity sucks. Particularly when you're talking about other people there with you. So when you're talking about having a big event like a movie premiere or a parade or a commencement or whatever, connectivity goes out the window. So, you know, you're talking about understanding how to build a church for Easter, that old saying. That's what you need to think about if, in fact, your monetization strategy includes large-scale events of any kind.
Yeah, 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 exactly. We're never happy about the connectivity where we are. There's always something wrong. Zooming out a little bit, where do you see things going in the next 3 years? Maybe it's too far.
No,
Next
no.
year.
Well, I'm impatient, so I'm the guy that's sitting in the car ready to go at all times. So things move a lot slower than I like. Um, but I would like to see that we're well down the road on the projects that we're working on now with an expanded portfolio, because I believe that everything that we're doing on the hospitality side, on the retail side, can be scaled. And so places like, let's use an example around here, South Coast Plaza, the preeminent shopping mall in California. Zero digital. Why? Local guy, very careful about what he does, whatever. So there's a huge opportunity. How that gets done? Well, that's going to be a human issue, not a technology issue. So things like that. The conversation that we're having on the retail front involve an international retailer. They have a fundamental issue in that the location that they are physically rooted in has changed. When they bought the building, everything was the upswing. All that has receded, and now they're in a very bad neighborhood. So it's about technology. Well, I shouldn't say it that way, but it's a challenged neighborhood. How about that? The technology can address some of those things. So safety and security is a big part of this, because the sensor network and understanding, is this door closed? What's going on? Situational awareness. That's a key piece of it, because if you can't keep the customer safe in your physical environment, they're not going to come. So there's some very fundamental things, connectivity, safety, and security, that need to be addressed as a piece of this. And then you can start thinking about, hey, let's enhance this experience so people can have fun. But if you're not safe in a spot, you're not going to have fun. So you need to be mindful of the fact that it's not all bells and whistles. There's some really fundamental issues that need to be addressed wherever you are. In addition to basic connectivity, safety and security is a key piece of that. So to answer your question, I think this is going to be a lot more understandable by a lot more people a couple years down the road, because I've definitely seen in the last several years people are talking about it, and the fact that people now know the difference between AI, AR, and VR, or at least more people do. It was all sort of, let's throw it all into XR. That's a basket of things people don't understand. Everybody has begun to understand AI. I think people are beginning to realize what a valuable tool it is, particularly when you start talking about, I need data support for this thing. Well, AI plays a key role in that. Otherwise, scrambling to get urban data sets, 86%, some huge number of data is wasted. So why do you want a sensor network if you can't visualize the data so it's a useful tool? Otherwise, save the money. And, getting the right kind of proprietary data and getting it in front of the right people. So not to bash on the mobile phone device data sets, but they're taking sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. And retail is very different than industrial applications. So understanding merchandising, the customer experience, all that, as you start looking at these data sets in your digital twin, that's an important part of it. And it's a big part of our value proposition, is that we've been in the hospitality business. We've been in the retail development business. We've been in the multifamily business. So we understand what the priorities are of the people that run these assets, and by the way, the user experience, because we've been in the position of trying to lease tenants who are interested in serving those customers. So we have a pretty interesting lens on things that really is unique in the marketplace, I think.
Yeah, but I want to know what's your vision on how Smart City Lab will evolve.
So Smart City Labs, I think, will always be a company based in Southern California, but my career so far and my team has been all over the world. So we see this as being a very scalable platform that can work across the U.S. and internationally, assuming that the U.S. doesn't piss off everybody that we know. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But there are some universal truths between cities, and I think this platform really can be a universal tool, no matter where it is, in a developing city or an established one. And really what's interesting to me is the idea of using this as an economic development tool, because economic development means opportunities for stakeholders. And again, going back to it, the digital divide piece is an important part of it. But providing the connectivity, a fiber line to someone's house, okay, they need to have the tools. They need to know how to use those tools. And that's why the digital twin is important, because it helps people, no matter what their background is, understand what's going on in a way that's never been possible before. So if you're asking me where I want to be and what excites me the most, that's the piece of it that I think is the most compelling.
Okay. And what will be a win? What will be a win look like if we fast forward 2027, 28? Let's make it facetious.
Well,
A win.
an easy to describe win for me would be for people to experience the places that I see when I go to downtowns, when I go to places like Hollywood, because I carry in my head the visualization of what was there and what could be there. And so that's where the cognitive twin and this game-based platform really allows you to see that kind of a thing and really to tell the stories. Because otherwise, if you and I walk down a city street together, and my friends will vouch for this, I guarantee, I will tell you the story of the places that we're walking by, the building, the store, the intersection, whatever it is. And I can tell you, not everybody wants to hear it, and they don't want to necessarily hear it multiple times. So this allows the story that you want to hear to be told because you curated the experience yourself. But it gives everybody an opportunity to have a more rich experience of a place that's just not possible today. And there's so many stories that go with the places, whether it's a museum or a building or a store or whatever, that I think are compelling. And this is a tool that allows you to sort of filter what you hear and what your interests can be addressed in this way in a really compelling fashion.
I love it. Okay, let's wrap with a couple of fast questions, fast rapid fire questions. A city you think is getting all right?
Wow. Yeah.
Or a district, or a corner street. No, a
Well,
city, a city.
I'll say
San
this.
Diego.
No. I think smaller cities are easier to manage. So just thinking about the LA region, the smaller size cities and I'm not using these examples to say that these are the perfect places, but Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Culver City, they're all independent cities within the larger archipelago. And I think it's easier for them to address a lot of the issues. Now, I'm not advocating that we break things up, but there's a big difference between the far side of the valley in LA and San Pedro. It's probably, a 2-hour drive. And so managing those disparate locations is difficult at that scale. So I think smaller cities are a little bit easier to run. I think all cities, unfortunately, at the moment, are suffering from the same thing. And it really is a challenge for me personally, because my entire career has been sort of following the trajectory of urban development. The revitalization of cities has been my interest my entire career. But I have been in traveling around, whether it's New York or Chicago or San Diego or LA, you can see that progress is receding now. And so if there's anything that needs to happen, and that's where I think some of these tools really could be helpful, because it's taken 30 to 40 years to get where we're at. Very quickly, it's eroding. How long is it going to take us to get back? So I think that's it's not the answer to your question, but I think smaller is probably better. These tools, I think, are critical. I think people are going to start to realize it's a cost-effective way to address some of these issues, because whether it's Michigan Avenue or Fifth Avenue, they all have problems. Smaller districts, you can point to every one of those cities, and you can point to a thriving, smaller scale district where people are going, pedestrian districts, outdoor, blah, blah, blah. I think that's really the prototype to create these smaller, human-scaled kind of environments, whether that's in an enclosed mall kind of a context or just an organically created urban district. So I don't
Okay.
know that there is a perfect place. I think every city is struggling now because the world is changing so dramatically.
No, of course. Okay, good answer. One piece of outdated thinking in urban design that needs to go.
The idea that bigger freeways and bigger streets is the answer. I don't think they're the answer anywhere, although there's certainly plenty of times when I'm sitting on a street in LA wondering, why isn't this wider? And the answer is you make it wider, there's just more cars on it. But
Yeah.
I think people are beginning to realize that transportation is part of the solution. The other part of that solution is high density development next to the transportation so that people can actually use that. People that have had the experience of living in New York or Boston or a place that has a robust public transit system realize the utility of that, and it's a lot easier for them to understand. A place like LA, where we're used to getting in a car and listening to our own tunes on the way to work for an hour each way, it's pretty hard to say, okay, now you're going to be on a big public station in a shared experience. In New York, riding the subway is kind of an experience in its own right. That's where everybody gets together. Not everybody is on that wavelength yet, but I think that's really the future.
Okay. A book, podcast, or thinker you love in this space?
Oh, wow. Well, my former business partner described me as a serial information collector. So my problem is not a favorite, it's too many.
You have a lot. Okay. A whole bunch.
No, I think, I read 4 newspapers every day and LinkedIn and all that. I don't know that there's one, but I think the reality is too many people are listening to too few. So, I struggle to try and get a accurate picture of what's going on in current news. And I will tell you that a disturbing trend that really bugs me is, and I'm a frequent, constant AI user, but people that are posting news articles that are written by AI, it's like, you can tell, and it's that same format. And unfortunately, I don't know who trained AI to do it, but it takes the attitude of you're less intelligent than I am. Let me tell you the story. It's like that's not an attitude. It's like let's all learn together. But I will say I think it's a really interesting time to be alive, and getting information from a variety of sources is critical. I've gotten called out for sending around animal videos that are made by AI. It's cute, whether it's AI or not, right? But there's this whole sort of thing going on. So I think, to answer your question, I think you should try and look at everything that comes your way. Try, and I have a stack of things in the physical and the digital world for me to read. So if you're asking what I want to do in 20 years, it's going to be sitting around reading all day.
Yeah, the quality of us will be selecting good info or good network. But an underrated superpower you have learned as a founder.
I think the key to be successful is understanding the opposite person's perspective. Because when I'm constantly, a thread throughout my career has always been being on the lunatic fringe, as I call it, of the real estate business. So I'm comfortable being in that sort of extreme position. But when you're talking about things that are innovative, that can be very challenging. And so you want to make sure that you are thinking in terms of what's the capacity of the other party to understand what's going on here, and how can I make this relevant to them? I certainly wouldn't say that's a superpower. It's a skill set that needs to be developed every single day.
Fair enough. And a problem in cities today you wish more entrepreneurs tackled?
Ask the question again.
A problem in cities today you wish more entrepreneurs tackle?
I wish more people would think about how to benefit the community from development. And when you meet a developer that's actually focused that way, it's so refreshing. when you meet somebody who's only interested in the bottom line and their personal bottom line, it's so uninteresting. So, I'm hoping that the next generation, and there are some significant signs that suggest that it's the case, they feel like my generation has sort of strip mined the globe, and it's up to them to try and save it. So I think there's sort of this mentality that's like, okay, no one's coming to save us. We need to deal with this. So I'm hopeful that the coming generations are more focused on the well-being of all stakeholders and creating opportunities for everybody on the spectrum, demographically and economically.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, community is major important anyway.
It's literally our tagline: connecting communities.
Fantastic. Jack, that has been incredible. Thank you. You're building something that bridges infrastructure, imagination, and that's not easy, but it's urgently needed. And thank you very much for your insight.
My
For
pleasure.
anyone listening, welcome. For anyone listening who wants to follow your work and connect with Smart City Labs, what's the best way?
Just reach out to me directly. I'm at Jack@Smart-City Labs. You can just Google Jack Illes, ILLES, and find me pretty easily. But I love talking about cities, as you can tell, and benefiting the urban context is really what I'm all about.
I love it myself. It's a great conversation and very, very insightful and interesting. And thank you very much, Jack.
Thank you. Enjoyed our time together.
That's it for today's episode of the AI Interconnect podcast. And if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you.